First off, with the globalism thing, I think there is a tendency just to want to centralize things and to consolidate power. I think that's in human nature. Disagree that there is like that we can pin it all on the Rothschilds or the Jews or just Wall Street, like that there is this thing Wall Street. Yeah, there's this thing Wall Street, but there's the overturning of Wall Street, like who stays on top, changes all the time. Jeff Bezos was nowhere near the top 15 years ago. I mean, those kind of upheavals of capital in short periods of time. Mark Zuckerberg was a college student. The next thing you know, he's a billionaire. Like those kind of upheavals, building a dynasty out of nothing, like no actual hard resources or hard things being sold. Like the changing of hands and the changing of power shifts a lot. And so I don't think there is this global conspiracy. Now, there are people who try to do that and should try to consolidate power. I think the enemy is corruption, the tendency to, nepotism, trying to keep people on the inside. And we see that all over the world, from America to India and beyond. Political dynasties, you have them, we have them. The war machine, I totally agree with a lot of these complaints about a lot of this stuff. I'm a big fan of the individual. That's what the internet's good for. And, hopefully we can talk through some of this stuff too. The next question about Bitcoin, I don't understand it at all, really. No. But I am committed to learning more about it because I really am an Austrian economics sympathizer. Everything I've read dealing with Austrian economics and libertarianism from an economic perspective, I just resonate with it 100%. And I know that that's not necessarily the most popular thing in certain circles. Keynesian economics has been the way that we have done things for 100 years, and I don't agree with it. I fundamentally think that it is saying that you and I and the little people who don't pay their dues in the existing systems can't have a say in how things go. And also, it's a very consumptive. People keep blaming capitalism. I believe that it's really Keynesian consumerism. I think that's really the type of thing, which basically everything is disposable. The way the economy grows is by buying, not by making. And that, I think, is the fundamental problem. People keep blaming capitalism. No, I think it's consumerism. Those are some of my thoughts there. Hadoop, thank you. Those are the type of conversations I love to have. All right, Upgu. Melissa Ford, if you should take anything from India, it's the philosophy of karma. Do your genuine good bit and good things will happen to you, as the Gita says. There are many around who see more in this world than stupid Bollywood films and songs. That is true. There's much more to India than Bollywood films and songs. And
thank you. Well, we are trying our best. It's interesting. I'm actually listening to a podcast. The one podcast I mentioned I listened to, Jordan B. Peterson. So I'm listening to his one about the story of Cain and Abel right now. It's very interesting. Actually, he's talking about how sometimes for some people, like, it just comes easy. They get those opportunities. And you're like, they're the golden child. Why is it coming so easy to them? And then others, and he was actually citing one of his children as an example. Like, one of his children, things just never happened, and it just kept, bad thing after bad thing. And both, he was kind of saying, like, both his children are good children, good people. And why things come easily for one and not the other. It was really interesting. And it's actually made me stop and think a lot today.
So it is really important. What I like about Jordan Peterson's podcast, where he's analyzing Bible stories, is that I, as a Christian, have kind of taken them for granted in a very Christian sense. And so he's analyzing them from a psychological sense. And so his perspectives on them are just very different. Then they really just apply to a kind of moral considerations and ethical choices and things like that. And so his point with that Cain and Abel story is to say that, just because bad stuff happens to you or it seems harder for you than it does for someone else, you don't know what's going through that person's mind, and you are responsible for your reactions, not theirs. So it's like with Jabby, like we're not responsible for Jabby's life, and we don't know what he's gone through. And we'll get to a comment later on where someone talks about they got to meet Jabby in person when he came to India, and they got to talk some stuff out, and it was, he hasn't had an easy go of it either. Like, he has other things we didn't see, and he didn't air his dirty laundry or the things that had happened to him. You don't know what's going through someone else's mind or in their life. And so to use that as an excuse for you to be a jerk, that's what Cain does and becomes a terrible person. Like, that's unacceptable. And
it's true. I am responsible for my bitterness.
Right.
And there's no one who can help me through that but myself.
Right. And what I kind of like to do, what I really appreciate about Peterson, again, is that he's coming at this from a psychological, doctoral science perspective. I'd like to do the same thing with more Hindu stories and stories from the East, because he does one thing. He talks about the Tao Te Ching, and again, it was so good because, again, like Westerners, like what ends up happening a lot of times when a Westerner tries to translate a Hindu book or a Chinese philosophy book or something like that, it ends up, they don't understand what they're talking about. And so they just make it a point for point translation. And so the meaning is lost. Like what's conveyed to you when you read the Ramayana or the Mahabharata and it gets translated to American, they're just like, oh, what does that mean? Like, so his way of communicating the Tao Te Ching was just, I was like, wow, that's why they get into this. I get it. I get some picture of what Taoism is about, you know? So I'd love to be able to do the same thing that he's doing with Bible stories, or that moment from the Tao Te Ching with Hindu stories. And so that's why I do. It's a tall order, but no, I'm the guy for the job.
I know, not me.
Because I read so many of these things, guys. Like I read so many of these things. I'm like, you're an expert. This person's like a doctor of Hindu studies, and I read what they say about Hindu. I'm like, this is not even close. And I mean, I've only dipped my toe in it, and I'm like, this is not even close. This is just pat. It's just like the chicken soup for the soul Hindu version. You know, like stop that. But I would love for someone to be like that. And I am starting to look. I've already started watching like some of the things that are being suggested. But I want to find a way to communicate it in a way that like Westerners can understand, that I can understand. There's a form in translation, they call it dynamic equivalence. You know, you've got like very rigid translational forms where you have the original language and you just translate it verbatim, and so much is lost. You know, and so I think dynamic equivalent cross-cultural communication is a very important thing, because maybe the words or the metaphors change, but then all of a sudden like the aha moment comes, like, oh, I get it. You know, like that hero in that story is kind of like this hero in this story from our culture, and you can say, yeah, it's a little bit different though, here's why. And so, you know, you just need something. You need a bridge. You need these bridges to kind of understand. And so I hope to be able to do that with my study of Hinduism, to be able to find some stuff that can communicate across these boundaries, and in a way, in the same way that Peterson's doing it with the Bible, because like we're just listening to him like hours and hours and hours, these lectures on the Bible. I went to a Christian college. I grew up as a Christian, and I have never heard people talk about the Bible in this way. And I think it's very constructive. And so it's almost like you need an outside perspective sometime to see the good in your own culture.
Right, like us, you know, stepping out of America and coming back. Sometimes
right.
It helps you.
And I see a lot, I feel like a lot of people are jumping ship on a lot of Indian tradition, that they're throwing out the baby with the bathwater kind of thing. They're like, I don't like this part of India, I don't like this part of Hinduism, and just kind of throwing everything out. There's stuff that's going to be lost. Like there are things. I'm not a multiculturalist in the like, yeah, we all believe the same thing, and let's just keep everything the way it's always been. But at the same time, there's beautiful things that are being lost, and I do want to see those preserved, and I do want to see how they can be reinterpreted. You know, you look at all of the stories that we tell, all they do are just reinterpretations of old good myth. You know, the Lord of the Rings is just reinterpretations of old good myth. Like we want, you know, new good myths that can kind of carry on the moral values and philosophical ideas of old, you know. Whoa, that was good. Thank you. Good. Oracle has a very interesting question. Ford and Alyssa, why do you think America is ahead of many countries when it comes to sports? Olympics, U.S. 2,520 medals. Best colleges, 95% of top 100 are in U.S. Most number of Fortune 500 companies, 132 of them. Biggest military, biggest movie industry in terms of money generated. Nobel Prize winners, 353. What are you guys doing differently than the rest of us? It can't be that just U.S. has more money, or is it guys are more ambitious, more strong-willed, or just plain lucky? That's a good question. And again, this is one of the reasons why I think that it's important. You know, I think we have to be conservative and liberal. We have to conserve the good things about cultures that come before us, and we have to be liberal in that we need to think about the future, how to change. Like if something's broken, how can we fix it? But if something's not broken, don't break it. You know, and so I think you need to have kind of both of those feet. You know, have to work in both of those ways. Why specifically Britain and America have been so influential on the world stage is an interesting question, because you think about Britain, it's very small geographically, but it was the preeminent empire on the globe. And then in Britain's wake came America. And I don't think we are going to be preeminent for much longer. I think I think the global stage is already being shared. And I think we're going to start seeing a specialization of nations where different nations have different things to bring to the table. But as far as why we've come this far, I think it's the industry of the individual. Video that Bono, it was some talk he was giving at a university, and he talks about the idea of America. And again, coming from an outsider, just hearing him say it, I was like, wow, yeah, that's what we want when we say to be American. It's not this jingoistic sort of like, America, if yeah. I mean, for some people, it is still that. It's this patriotic sort of like very, one-sided culture, this very, blinder view of the world. That's not what excites me about America. What excites me about America is the way that Bono puts it in this video, the idea of the individual controlling their destiny, the life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, but not pursuit of this superficial sort of like consumption, but this making a new world, a new world of ideas, a new world of production, a new world of art. I'll link that because I thought it was really good, the way that he articulated it. And when you're, we've gotten to this epidemic where we've gone too far, and now we're just fat and indifferent and subsidized and entitled. Because if you tell people too much, you can follow your dreams and you make it happen, people actually get kind of lazy about it and don't actually follow their dreams. They just kind of like, just eat and sit back and binge watch Netflix. America did not have it easy in its inception. Like there was a lot of fighting towards something, and there was a lot of industry, not just in the machine kind of way, but industry and the way that people's work ethic was, So anyways, I'll link that because I think it's pretty good. I think it's a partial explanation, but luck has something to do with it. Geography has a lot to do with it. The size of the land, the geographical resources, a lot of those things have to do with it. The world story is not over though. We are just one link in the chain of human history. So I think interesting stuff is ahead in the next century, and it's not going to be an American century. It's going to be a global century in the not globalist sense. Where we have one world order and 5 people rule it.